How'd that challenge go? Hopefully you were able to get a working version of the To-Do application up and running. We're going to start this process together by converting the filters.js file, and we'll be continuing on with the conversion process in the next video as well. Now, if you didn't start with filters, maybe you started with to-dos or something else, that's perfectly fine. The exact order you did things in doesn't matter, as long as you were able to get to a working application. All right, let's go ahead and start by setting up the filters default object. So right here, const filters can store that object. And on the object, we need two properties, one for each of the filters we've been using in this app. The first one was search text, which we started off as an empty string. And the second one was hide completed, and we had started hide completed off with a value of false. So that takes care of this first comment. Now we can move on to the functions down below. Let's start with get filters. Const get filters. This is an easy one. It takes no arguments, and all it does is it returns the filters object. So right here, I can use the arrow function shorthand, just like this, and we're done. Now we can move on to the next function in our list, which is set filters just down below. Const set filters equals an arrow function. This time we are going to set up a function body, and we'll also be accepting a single argument, our updates object. Now on this updates object, we could potentially have one of two values, either search text, hide completed, or potentially both. So let's go ahead and set up the function to actually change the filters object if one or both of them are there. Just like we did with the notes application, let's go ahead and check the types first. If, right here, the type of updates dot search text is equal to a string. So if it is provided and it is a string, we're going to go ahead and inside of the if statement body, actually set filters dot search text equal to the updated value on updates.search text. Perfect. Now this just takes care of search text. We want to do something very similar, though slightly different, for hide completed. So if the type of updates.hide completed is equal to a Boolean, we're going to go ahead and set filters.hide completed. So filters.hide completed needs to get updated. And we're going to get its new value from updates.hide completed, which we just verified is indeed a Boolean. Perfect. Now both of those functions are completed, and we can move on to the last thing we have to do in this file, which is to actually export them so they can be used elsewhere in the application. Right here, we can set up our export. I'm going to set up two named exports. The first one, I'll export get filters, and the second one, I'll export set filters. Now at this point, I like to actually test that this code is working before writing even more code and getting further into the project. I'm going to do that by importing both of these in index.js and actually testing them out. I'm going to leave the comments up top for now, since the code that we're about to write won't live around for the entire application. I'm going to import those two things, get filters and set filters. And like we did for the notes application, we're just going to make sure they work. So right here, I'm going to get them from ./filters. Let's go ahead and start by getting the filters. Then we'll try to change them, and then we'll get the new filters values. Console.log to print something. I'm going to print whatever comes back from calling get filters. Then I'll take this line and copy it and paste it 2 lines below. Right in between, I'm going to try to change the filters. So I'll call set filters once again. With the updates object, I'll try to change both of them. So the search text, I'll set that equal to something like Philadelphia. Then I will also go ahead and set hide completed. And that starts off at false. So to make sure it changes, let's try to switch it over to true. Perfect. At this point, we can now save all of our files and actually test things out. Over in the terminal, let's get that dev server up and running. I'm going to switch to the terminal. Currently, we are navigated into the notes project, so we can use cd /to-do app to get over to the to-do app project. Then we can use npm install to make sure we install all of our local dependencies. Once the installation is complete, all we're going to need to do is run the dev server command to actually test filters out. If that's working, we're going to move on to the to-dos module and put our focus on that. All right, we should be done in just a second here. Perfect. Let's go ahead and run the dev server. npm run dev-server. Once this is up, we should be able to refresh the page in the background at localhost 8080. And what do I see? I see my boilerplate HTML, which is fine. We haven't touched that yet. The important thing is down below. I have my original filters object where the search text is empty and hide completed is false. Then down below that, I have my modified one where search text is Philadelphia and hide completed is true. So we've now created and verified that the filters file is working as expected. Next up is the slightly more complex but totally doable todos.js file. Many of these functions already existed in the old project, so you could have copied them from the to-do functions file and repurposed them. Maybe you wrote everything from scratch. Either way gets the job done. First up, let's go ahead and create our array. So let to-dos equal. We're going to set it up to start off with an empty array. Then we can focus on load to-dos down below. The goal of load to-dos is to load those to-dos out of local storage and then change the value of the to-dos array. We can grab the getSaveToDos function and repurpose that to fit our needs. I'm going to go ahead and copy that function over to todos.js and then repurpose it like we did with getSavedNotes when we converted the Notes application. So right here, we're first going to change the name to load to-dos. Then down below, I am going to set the to-dos array equal to the parsed JSON, or below that, I'll set the to-dos array equal to a new empty array. Awesome. So load to-dos is now all done. Next up, we have save to-dos. Save to-dos is just going to be taking this data in this array and saving it. Over in the to-do functions file, we have a very similar one right here. I'm going to copy things over to the new file. It's already called save to-dos. The only thing we need to change is that instead of expecting an argument, we don't expect an argument. We just access the to-dos array right here, which is indeed in scope. Perfect. Next up on our list, before we actually test things, is going to be getToDos. GetToDos didn't have a companion in the old project, but we can go ahead and create one since it's super simple. Const getToDos equals a function that takes no arguments, and all we do is we use the arrow function shorthand to return the to-dos array. That takes care of save to-dos and get to-dos down below. Now, before we actually go ahead and test anything, let's knock out create to-dos so we can actually go through the process of creating some data and then using the rest of the functions to make sure they all work. Right here in the to-do functions file, we actually didn't have a version that did that. We never had a function that did that. It was something we manually did over inside of to-do app. If you remember, we had gone ahead and pushed something onto the array, then we saved the to-dos. We're going to have to do something very similar, though in this situation, we're going to be creating a function that gets that done. So const create to-do. I mentioned that this one should indeed take in the to-do text, then it needs to add something to that array and save things. Now we are going to have to use the UUID library here, so let's go ahead and make sure we install that first. I'm going to switch over to the terminal, shut down the dev server, and use npm install UUID at 3.2.1. Once that command finishes, we'll just start up the dev server once again, and then we'll finish off the create to do function. Actually, we can just start things off. Well, never mind. It just finished. I was going to say we could start things off while it's running, but it finished very quickly. I'm going to restart the dev server. Over here, let's go ahead and actually knock this one out. So once again, we are still going to be pushing something onto that array. So todos.push. That thing is going to be an object, and on the object, we're going to have the exact same properties we had before. We had an ID, which was a UUID, so we have to import and call that function. Import UUID v4 from UUID/v4. Now we can call the function right here, UUID v4. Perfect. The next property we had set up was the text property, where text equals the text variable. Remember, if we're setting an object property equal to a variable with the same name, we can simply set things up like this. After the text property, the last one we had was completed. when we're creating a new to-do, we don't want it to be completed, so we're going to be setting completed to false by default. The last thing we have to do inside of here is call save to-dos. That's going to make sure that the new item we add on to the array actually gets saved in local storage. Now we have everything we need to actually test out this file. We're going to do that by importing it from index.js and using these functions. Before we do, let's go ahead and move to the bottom and actually make sure this stuff gets exported. So down below, the first thing we're going to do is call load to-dos to make sure that the to-dos array does get populated. Then we're going to set up our exports for those functions that we just created. So we have get to-dos, we have save to-dos, and we have create to-do, all of which we're going to be using over inside of that new file. Actually, we don't need save to-dos to be exported. Maybe we did export that, that could be fine, but create to-do is going to automatically save for us. All right, we have this in place. That means we can save to-dos.js and test things out. Over inside of index.js, we can delete all of the code from when we tested out our filters since we know those work, and we're going to import things related to the to-dos file. Right here, get to-dos, then after get to-dos, create to-do. Perfect. We're going to grab all of those from // in the source directory, the to-dos file. Down below that, I'm going to first print all of the to-dos, then I'll create a new one, then I will print them again, making sure I'm seeing the new one showing up. So right here, console.log, calling get to-dos and just dumping its return value to the console. Then down below that, I'm going to call create to-do, and remember, this takes a single argument, the string text for what you're trying to do. So I could say finish another course video. Then once again, I'm just going to print the to-dos, so console.log, calling get to-dos again. All right, let's go ahead and save index.js and see what happens. Over in the browser, when we originally start, we have an array with no items, then we have an array with one item, and this is exactly what I was expecting. We have a uniquely generated ID, we have our to-do text, and we have completed set to false. So far, everything seems to be working as expected. Let's go ahead and refresh the page just to make sure it can load that data out of local storage. If I refresh, we go from one item to two items, which is indeed correct. Now that we verified this stuff is working, let's continue working with the to-dos file. We already knocked out create to-do. So next up on our list is the ability to remove a to-do from the to-dos array by its ID. Down below, let's knock that out. Const remove to-do. We're going to set this up as an arrow function with a function body. We need one argument, the ID. Maybe you called this to-do ID. Maybe you just called it ID. Either way gets the job done. Inside of here, we're now going to remove the item if it exists. Our previous function in to-dos functions had all of that code already set up, so we can go ahead and copy and paste it, repurposing it for this project. I'm going to copy the content of that function over to the new one. The only argument the old function was relying on was ID. Since we already have that in place, this one's done. Next up is toggle to do. Toggle to do also existed in some capacity in the old project. So let's go ahead and grab that and copy it over to the new to-dos file. Down below, I'm going to paste it in. This one takes in the ID argument, which lines up with our new version. It returns nothing, which also matches up. And since the arguments are the same, it's still going to work. It's still working with the to-dos array, which is indeed in scope. Now there's some changes we're going to have to make just to save the to-dos. We want to call save to-dos at the end of both of these like we did for create to-do. So right in here, if we do indeed find something to remove and we remove it, we'll call save to-dos. Awesome. Then down below, if we do find a to-do and we toggle it, we'll call save to-dos as well. Perfect. Now both of those are completely functional and we can actually go ahead and export them. Right here, I'm going to export remove to-do and I'm going to export toggle to-do. The last thing we're going to knock out in this video is actually making sure those two functions work. Over in index.js, let's go ahead and grab both. I'll grab remove to-do and I'll grab toggle to-do. Then all I'm going to do is remove this line right here that creates a new to-do. Over inside of the console, let's go ahead and grab one of the IDs for the 3 to-dos we have. I'm just going to grab one of them, and we're going to try to toggle this one. So bring its completed value from false to true. Toggle. To-do should get that done. I call it with the ID. I'll then save the file and we can test things out. Right here, I still have just 3 to-dos, which is correct since I didn't create a new one. And the last item is indeed having its toggle switched. Right here, we have a completed value of true, which is great. Next up, let's go ahead and try to remove that same to-do and make sure it actually goes away. I'm just going to swap out the function name from toggle to-do to remove to-do. I'm going to save index.js. Right here, we go from 3 to-dos to just 2, which is once again correct. That last item, the one with the ID that matched, has indeed been removed. And there we go. We have the filters module all done. We have the to-dos module all done. And in the next video, we're going to wrap up the conversion process by integrating all of this with the DOM. I'm excited to continue on in the next video, so let's go ahead and jump right in.